Today, we're diving into the 5 levels of financial well-being, which is a framework that helps people understand where they are in their financial journey and what it takes to move to the next stage. So once again, joining me is Mike Clarke, co-founder of Protection Point Advisors, who has spent decades helping individuals and business owners navigate their financial path. And we're going to break down each one of these levels from financial security to absolute financial freedom, what it looks like, discuss the habits and the challenges that separate these different levels and those that achieve lasting wealth and those who stay stuck. So before we get going, hit that like and subscribe button, put your questions below. We will answer them. But if you ever wonder what it really takes to achieve financial freedom, this conversation is for you. So, morning, Mike.
Good morning.
Welcome back.
Thank you very much. It's always nice to be here and talking about whatever it is we talk about.
So today we're going to talk about the 5 levels of wealth. The first one being financial security. And, it's typically talked about in terms of achieving it when you're comfortably covering your essential living expenses, such as housing, utility, etc. In your opinion, what are some of the key habits or financial principles that help someone move from financial instability to financial security?
Well, I think the first is to know what you make and to know what you need to spend, and I think most people, if they have a job, they know what their bottom line is. You know what you're taking home every couple weeks or week or or a month or whatever. Then I think you have to match that up with what your living expenses are. And I think this is where it gets a little dicey for some people because it's tough to keep score. But there are a lot of tools out there that help you do it. Rocket Money's one. Mint's another one. I mean, there are all kinds of apps that the bank, just about everyone. I mean, I don't know anybody that writes checks anymore.
Right.
So, the vast majority of us are paying our bills on banking apps and through automatic payment and all that kind of thing. And so it's kind of an easy thing to audit, but you got to know the difference between what you make and what you spend. If what you spend is more than what you make, which is true for a lot of people, unfortunately, then what do you do about that? Well, it probably means your lifestyle is too expensive. And you have to look at where you can maybe trim here and there. It could be as simple as, I don't know, dining out less for some people. It could be you have too many subscriptions. It could be a lot of things. Could be about too much car. That happens. So it could, but getting to it is possible. And again, I'm not disrespecting the fact that some people are just kind of on the edge and up against it. I really want to be sensitive to that. But if you are, it's all the more reason to take diligent inventory over what comes out and what comes in. Make decisions. If again, you're in the negative, make decisions about what makes sense and what doesn't. And then I also think that and I'm going to say this kind of in the abstract, but one of the ways to generally to make more money, elevate yourself economically, is to look at what your opportunities are, starting, I guess, with your current workplace, and how can you be the best at what you do. And I only mention that is because in today's world, we really have a shortage of exceptional people. We really have a shortage of people who know how to think and care about what they do and are employees that their supervisors and managers and whatnot and employers don't have to worry about. If you strive to be that kind of employee, you're gonna make more money because nobody's gonna want to let go of you.
And so, Mike, with that, there's a lot of people that would like to make transitions, but they don't feel like they have the resources financially to do that. So how important is having, say, an emergency fund so you're able to have that flexibility, not only to pay bills if something were to happen, but to make that shift to another company and feel the confidence that, hey, I can do that because I have this fund behind me?
Well, first of all, I also think too that, and I'll just say one more thing about this. I think if you work somewhere and you can see that there are chances for advancement where you work, I think it's perfectly appropriate to go to whoever it is supervises you or whatever and say, and just be real about that. Say, look, I want to advance here. I'm totally committed to doing it. What will it take for me to do that? And just
Right.
being absolutely plain and real about that. I think because so few people are. I think if you strive to be that employee that is the exception rather than the rule, you also have to know what your worth is. Your worth in the workplace is very, very elevated, and I think most people underestimate what their, especially people like that, they underestimate their worth in the workplace. So I do want to say something or speak to that. As far as making the transition, yeah, an emergencies fund's vital. I mean, if you want to transition from living paycheck to paycheck, then you've got to build an emergency reserve that's ideally 3 to 6 months of lifestyle income. Okay.
Okay.
And you also want to make sure that you have, adequate insurance, mostly health insurance, things like that. So for what, if you get sick or whatever, you're not burning up the emergency fund. Okay. So that's the path out of living paycheck to paycheck is is that you have adequate reserves, and it starts with, in some cases, paying down debt. And then I think the good news for those that need to pay down debt, usually credit card debt, is that the efforts that you would use to pay it down, and it is possible to pay it down. It's beyond the scope of today's presentation, but it is possible. I mean, beyond the scope of today to talk about it, about how to do it. If once the effort that it takes to pay down the debt is also the same effort that you can deploy to build
Yeah.
the emergency reserve. In other words, if you're doling out X amount of money each month to pay off the credit cards, once credit cards are paid off, dole out the same amount of money each month to build an emergency fund. Okay.
Right.
And then slowly get yourself out of this sort of paycheck to paycheck thing. That's the pathway out. Okay.
So the next
Um,
step, Mike, is really getting into what they would consider financial vitality. And so what the articles are talking about is that you can cover all your basic needs and at least half of your discretionary expenses like dining, entertainment, small luxuries. I mean, this stage marks obviously that shift from a survival mode to having some breathing room. What are some of the common financial behaviors that you see that help people transition from that security to vitality?
Well, again, it's all about scorekeeping. Like, what do you make? What do you spend? And yeah, you're right. If you need to cut back on luxuries, you need to cut back on luxuries. But it's a temporary thing, though. I mean, there was a time in my life I did go to the grocery store with a calculator because I knew
Mm.
I had X amount of money to spend on groceries and that was it. Um, but it's temporary, though. I mean, because, and it's a whole lot less painful than people think. I mean, once you get going and once you get this going, um, it's a momentum shift that builds upon itself, I think. Um, and again, if you put that together with the fact that most people in their careers make more money as they get older and as they get better at their jobs and as their companies hopefully consider them to be more valuable and whatnot. Again, it doesn't always workplace isn't fair. Okay.
Right.
But I do think that again, I think knowing what your worth is and asking for what you think you're worth is it's an empowering thing to do. And I do think the two go together. But all that can build on itself, and you can sort of flip that script, I think, and transition yourself into different economic circumstances. It just has to be consistent and diligent.
So as people kind of raise their stature in the workforce, right? They start getting raises.
Right.
We see this a lot of people struggle with their own lifestyle inflation, right? Increased rate, increased money equals increased spending.
Mhm.
How can someone balance enjoying more freedom without jeopardizing their financial well-being?
Well, as you, it's an interesting thing that you just said. I think as your income goes up, um, it's not a permission slip to expand lifestyle in a corresponding manner.
Right.
It really is. When that happens, that's more about accelerating or building on things like emergency funds. It's more about um, beginning or continuing at a greater level to participate, say, in your company's retirement plan, or to put more money into a 529 or college fund or whatever. I mean, it really is about that increased income that you just spoke of, really is about increasing long-term comfort rather than feeding the short-term beast, buying a
Right.
new TV or eating out more. I mean, I see this as common. I mean,
Yeah.
you when you're up against it and you have to watch every penny, you're really good at keeping score because you have to be.
Right.
And then all of a sudden you make more money and you take your foot off the gas, okay, and stop doing that as much. And all of a sudden, dinners get a little bit more expensive, weekends get a little bit more expensive, what have you. And pretty soon you're like, well, I'm making more money now, but I have less of it. Why is that happening? We've heard this a lot
A
over the
lot.
years.
Right.
Yeah.
And then and making that transition, that paradigm shift actually goes to the third, which is financial independence. And this
Yeah.
is where your income, whether it's investments, your job, other sources, it starts to support your current lifestyle. So you're no longer living paycheck to paycheck. But
Right.
for you, Mike, being in the business as long as you have, how would you define financial independence?
Well, that's the same way I would look. Wealth means different things to different people, but
Right.
the one definition I think just about everybody can agree on is that you have enough. Uh, you've acquired enough assets, let's just say, that the income from those assets can support a lifestyle you're happy with. That's what it is. It's the ability to generate enough income without having to go to work to do it. That's the
Right.
simple definition. Now, that means different things to different people. I mean, as somebody who has I don't know, makes a modest income and is happy with that, well, then replacing that income from investments and assets is a wonderful thing. And it might not be a lot, but if you're, I don't know, an NBA guard, you're a professional athlete, it's a whole different thing.
Right.
So everybody has a different idea about how much lifestyle they're trying to replace, is my point.
So on the
Um,
other side of that conversation, though, what is the biggest misconceptions people have about financial independence in your experience?
wow. I think most people kind of don't know what it is. I think
Okay.
we get bombarded with images of what wealth is
All
uh,
day long.
all day long. The guy in the Rolls Royce, the big house, the mansion, the jewelry, the whatever.
Yep.
Um, and it doesn't mean that anybody. I mean, if you see somebody driving an expensive car, it doesn't mean they're wealthy. It might mean they're leveraged to the eyeballs.
Right.
You know. Um, My experience has been if you're in a gathering of people, the person who looks most like the janitor probably has the most money. Um, so I mean, looks are deceiving. Wealth does not equal the acquisition of expensive material things.
Yep.
Generally, if you can look, if you can afford a nice car, if you can afford a luxury car, um, without it compromising other larger, more important efforts, buy it. I don't care.
Right.
But if you're compromising your financial future, let's say, if you're compromising more important things, I don't know if it's the best decision um,
Yeah.
to do that. So I think the misconception about wealth is, too many people, I think, buy into what other people think it is, and that's not what it is.
Right. And that misconception kind of goes, once again, goes to the next one, which is financial freedom, where you can afford these luxuries, you can afford vacations at an extended level
Sure.
without financial stress. And so what do you think separates those who have financial independence from someone who is actually financially free?
Well, I think it's again, I don't want to oversimplify the answer, but I think it's as simple as knowing what you want and what works for you. I think that's the common denominator in everybody that I work with and know that has that level of financial freedom. They just know what works for them financially. And they got to that destination by just being methodical over many, many years. They just simply didn't spend all that they made, and the difference went elsewhere, and that's what built their wealth. It's super simple. But they also, along the way, became very aware of how they wanted to live, um, what works for them, what they're very in touch with what their values are regarding money. I think that's really important. Um, so I think that's the differentiator. They know what they want. They know what works for them. And by the way, we've seen this. I You see this with physicians sometimes. We used to work. We and do work a lot with physicians, and you'd see this with residents. Residents make no money for about 3-4 years, so they're just barely getting by. And then when they go into, either work for a medical group or a private practice or whatever, all of a sudden their income just like it's a tenfold increase, like boom,
Right.
right? So they go from no money, no money, no money for a long, long time to all of a sudden, wham, they have money. Um, and and we've seen so many of them just lose perspective. They buy the I deserve it car. They
Right.
buy the I deserve it house. In some cases, they go out and get the I deserve it wife, you know?
Yep.
And even in other cases, the I deserve it girlfriend, which means later on the I deserve it wife has half of everything. So I mean,
Right.
it just sort of is this bad progression, right? But it's all that comes about because again, they just stop keeping score. And then because there's an expectation that other people have, not so much now, but it used to be there was this expectation that doctors should live a certain way, should drive a certain car, dress a certain way, what have you. A lot of them bought into that. Okay.
Yeah.
And so I guess the trap you can fall into is buying into what other people's expectations are of how you should be in the world. And I'm not saying that we aren't all affected by what the world expects of us and how we want to appear in the world. I think that's one of the things when it comes to money that's not often talked about is that, yeah, you kind of do care how you
Yeah.
look in the world. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. You just want to care too much. Okay.
So on the other side of that coin, Mike, have you ever seen clients that have hit that level go from, like, as in an example, they go from residency to physician, they're making a lot of money, but they struggle with the guilt or the hesitation because they've reached that level?
Some, yeah. I mean, if you, especially, I think if you come from meager circumstances, sure, I think that's possible. Look, everyone's different, and it can go both ways, right?
Right.
And if you come from meager circumstances, now you have the opportunity to spend money on stuff, right? Um, you might want to go and do that because you might be thinking, this is a luxury that wasn't available to me, and I think it's kind of cool that it is. I do think that's short-lived, though. I think after a while, I mean, there's only so many handbags you can buy, or there's only so many cars, or what. I mean, it gets to the point where the novelty of it, I think, wears off a little bit. But that can go both directions, I think.
Yeah. And so the fifth kind of level here is absolute financial freedom.
Mhm.
And this is where money is no longer limiting factor. And this is where that paradigm shift goes from actually making money to actually being more of a philanthropist and giving back. And so, and I know that you have clients that do this, Mike. How
Right.
does a person focus that shift from wealth accumulation to more legacy, philanthropy, or impact when they've hit that level?
Well, when you hit that level, I think it becomes, what do you want your legacy to mean? Once you
Sure.
have enough money where it's like oxygen, breathe in, breathe out, that's it. Um, Again, I think it goes to these aesthetic questions. What do you want? What do you want from this? What do you want from that? And these are surprisingly tough questions to answer because you're asked to examine what your values are and and look backwards, look forwards, all this kind of thing. And I think it's part of the reason why a lot of estate plans fail because this is not fully considered.
Yeah.
You go out and you find an attorney, say, "Oh yeah, I guess I got to do an estate plan so I can avoid expenses and taxes or whatever." You go out and find an attorney, they draft an estate plan, they give you this giant binder that you don't understand. I mean, you open up the first few pages and try to read it and you go, ah, and you put it down. Um, and maybe and I'm sure that, the attorneys did their jobs and compartmentalized things the way they were supposed to be compartmentalized. But if you have an estate plan, you don't fully understand if it accomplishes what your ultimate goals are, because maybe you don't know what your ultimate goals are to begin with. That's a problem. Okay. So you got to think about what do I want my legacy to mean? Maybe there's a particular charity that you want to benefit. Maybe it's a
Yeah.
church. Certainly it's our loved ones. I mean, we kind of start there, but it might not just be that. Okay. So I mean, but I also think once you get your arms around that, it's super fulfilling that that someone else will be better off because you were there and you showed
Right.
up and you decided that you wanted it. I mean, what a wonderful thing. I just think I think it takes a lot of time and energy to consider all this, but I think it's really worth it. And as most people are not are married and it's mostly a family thing, I think this is something that should be considered within families. I
Yeah.
think, and all too often, estate plans, they're just not discussed amongst family members. They're just like, my dad said he's got it taken care of, and he doesn't want to talk about it.
Right. Right. We hear that a lot.
Yeah, yeah, and
And so
that's a bad thing.
and that is, yeah, we hear that quite a bit. But what is what is one of the things that is surprising that you've seen and how people behave when they reach this kind of freedom?
Well, again, I think there's a tendency across generations to be somewhat secretive about it.
Hmm.
So look, I'll give you an example in my own life. So my mom um, decided years ago when she drafted her trust that her kids, my brother, me, my brother, my sister, um, that we were doing fine.
Okay.
So she said or decided, well, I'm just going to leave it to the grandkids. Okay,
Okay.
so I'm going to divide it up equally amongst grandkids. To her, that kind of made sense, but she really didn't think that much about it. Okay. Um, so recently, and I am the trustee, I'm her successor trustee. And so recently she needed to draft an amendment, and I went to an attorney that I work with. So I pulled someone in that I trust. And this attorney looked at it and she said, I don't like this. I don't like
Mm.
the fact that you guys have been disinherited. Why is that? I said, well, that's just kind of what she decided to do. So she said, "You should go back and talk to your mom about this." By the way, this is what a good attorney does. Notices things that aren't that are questionable. So I went back and talked to my mom. I said, "You know what? Maybe," I said, "I don't really care, but maybe you should talk to my brother and my sister about this." So she talked to my brother about it. Turns out my brother did have an issue with it.
Oh,
Okay.
wow.
Not that he needed the money. He had an issue with it personally. And it gave them a chance to sort of hash out some things that had been, lingering for a while. So the long and short of it is my mom came back to me and said, "You know what? You're right. I shouldn't have done it this way." So she
Mm.
changed everything. And now it's my brother, my sister, and me. So that's an example of just something small that could turn into something big. And we see this a lot with estate plans. Okay. So all the more reason why families should just talk about it. This is what I recently had a conversation with a really, really large client of mine where we pulled his kids in to talk about the estate plan. And when we got done talking about it, the kids said to their dad, "Look, we want you and mom to go enjoy yourselves because you've worked hard all your life. You've very seldom done that. That's what we want for you." So in addition to the client saying, "This is what I want for the kids, for the beneficiaries," they got a chance to say what they wanted for him.
Hmm.
And it was kind of a powerful and honestly touching moment where they just and I think that gave him pause. When, oh, I don't know if I knew that. Not at this
Yeah.
level. Okay.
Yeah.
There are so many benefits for talking about this, and everyone should talk about it.
So, like, man, that's a lot. So, outside of that, because I mean, that's a pretty big piece of advice there is open communication with family is huge. But if you could give a piece of advice to someone striving to find that path from financial independence or financial freedom to that next level, what would that be?
Well, again, I don't want to be, I don't want to belabor this point, but I think it all emanates from just deciding what it is you want and where you want to go. How to get somewhere once you've decided to go there, that information's available. Okay.
Right.
Um, I mean, there's so much information out there now about how to make yourself financially healthy and well. It does take a little bit of study, and yeah, we live in a world that has a lot of noise in it. Um, but if you seek the, and again, if you have a, if you work for a company that has a retirement plan, um, there are resources within the retirement plan that can help. You can start to get educated on
Right.
this, but it really does begin with, well, what do you want? And unfortunately, most people are still in survival mode, and if all you're doing is looking to survive in the jungle one more month or one more week or whatever, it's very tough to get out of it. You can get out of it if the information is out there and available.
Right. And so, and this is why we do these interviews, Mike, to help as a resource to help further that, financial literacy with people. So anybody leave questions, leave them in the comments. We look forward to your comments. Mike, as always, thank you for being here. Appreciate it. We will be back here next Tuesday.
Thanks, Mike.